This podcast contains content that is graphic in nature and mature language that may be unsuitable for children or young listeners. Listener discretion is advised. One of the worst scenarios a parent can imagine is when a child goes missing. And in today's case, not only is that fear recognized, but the deviousness and ease of which this twice-convicted sexual predator was able to lure and eliminate a precious life in such a cold and calculated hunt is astounding. Join us for an extremely emotional roller coaster on today's episode of Sin Law. This episode contains discussion of sexual assault and the death of a juvenile. Listener discretion is extremely advised. Hello and welcome back. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Kyler.
And welcome to this episode of Sin Law. You guys heard the extra listener discretion advised. This is going to be a very heavy case, and
It's one of those where when you watch or listen to it, you try to put yourself in their shoes, and it's just hard.
And
it
then
hurts.
You don't want to.
It hurts too much.
You don't want to be there anymore. You want to back away slowly and never have to go back there again. So if any of you guys are paying attention, especially in Louisiana, we've had a couple headlines, and that's where this story came from completely.
Just like all of the other ones that we've done?
No, a lot of
in Louisiana?
But like this one came out of the headlines from me. Like a lot of the cases that we've done are been referenced or referred to us. This one I saw on my phone.
I misunderstood your point.
Right, we'll get to why it was on my phone just here recently later, but it grabbed me and would not let me go.
Oh, and just a small extra trigger deal. Any of you that have children, this will probably hurt more.
Yeah, but it also brings something, and specifically like social media and awareness of your children.
Oh no, it's an important thing. It's an important case to hear.
Right,
but
absolutely.
I just know that if you're already feeling somewhat triggered by the by
children in general, then you probably need to skip this episode. As much as we hate to lose a listener for any reason, we would hate it more to lose one for future. Absolutely. So if in any way that's something that might get you, and we don't want to cause anybody any more anxiety or stress or hurt than they already are.
This world is stressful enough.
Absolutely. So if that's not your cup of tea, if that's something that's going to bother you, please just skip it, okay? All right. So now that we've got that done and through, okay. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about the boy that is the focus of this story. His name is Justin Bloxam. And that is a fun name to say.
It is. That's pretty Bloxam.
It's Bloxam. I like the way it sounds when you say it. So Justin Bloxam was from Stonewall, Louisiana, which is located in DeSoto Parish. DeSoto Parish is actually northwestern Louisiana. It's on the line between Texas and Louisiana. The main seat of that parish is Mansfield, and their population for that parish is about 27,000 today.
DeSoto is a Shreveport area, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's right below. Well, Stonewall is about, I want to say it's about 30 miles or so from Shreveport.
Okay.
South. He was a 12-year-old boy, just a normal, sweet boy. He was about to turn 13 when these events happened. He had an easygoing, always smiling kind of personality. He had braces that he proudly showed in his last school picture. He was a big fan of skateboarding. He played football, and he had lots and lots of friends.
Lots and lots of girlfriends.
Lots and lots of girlfriends. He was just very...
I'm going to let you know right now that if I do laugh, it's mainly at the fact that his name is Justin and his best friend's name is Dustin.
Yes. And
I find that highly amusing.
We're just about to talk about Dustin, yes. So he was, by all accounts, just a loving and lovable person and a great student at his... now, they said DeSoto Elementary, but in all the other references and all the other information that I saw, it said middle school. So I think he was going into 7th grade, or he was in 6th grade because this happened over spring break. So on March 29th, 2010, Justin was staying overnight at his best friend Dustin's house. So we have a Justin and a Dustin. And like I said, this was during spring break. Now, Dustin and Justin lived about 6-7 minutes apart. And they, like I said, they both lived in Stonewall. And that, I actually looked at the population size for that town as well. And it's about 2,300 people. He had packed an overnight bag. His mom had driven him over to drop him off at Dustin's house to spend the night. And one of the quotes that I saw in there that just touched my heart was his mom, and it's so relatable. His mom was so proud of him because he remembered to pack his toothbrush. It was just so sweet. And so Justin and Dustin were hanging out, and according to Justin's mom, he would send upwards of 1,000 to 2,000 text messages a week, I think is what she said, or like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. He was always
the brother
on his phone.
said 100 an hour.
Okay, so 100 an hour. Either way, we're referencing the ID episode that I'll mention here in just a bit, but they all knew Justin was an avid texter. He was always texting everybody, trying to see what was going on. So they started hanging out, and they're watching movies. They're watching movies and just hanging out, and Justin had been texting, like I said, everybody. He was always texting all of his friends. At around 9 o'clock or so, Dustin started to get tired, so they went into Dustin's room to get in bed and watch TV. Well, Dustin went ahead and handed Justin the remote because he said he was going to go ahead and go to sleep. So he handed him the remote and said, "You can make sure you turn the TV off when you go to sleep." So about 9:30 or so, Justin received a text message from an unknown number, and he wrote back, "Who's this?" And the person wrote back, "Amber." And Amber said that she was a 14 or 15-year-old girl. I have seen it reported both ways.
Oh, I thought you meant she said she was a 14 or 15-year-old girl.
No.
I'm like, that's a weird answer.
No.
That would have been a warning right there.
Something said 14, something said 15. So it was, either way, she was 14 or 15 years old, a teenager.
I remember, I'm a 14 or 15-year-old girl.
Right. There's, later in the cell phone records, there was kind of a lull in between the time that Dustin said he went to sleep and the first message that was received from Amber. So sometime after 9:30, the girl Amber that he had been texting, she had been constantly saying like, "Hey, you need to come meet me," and she had been sending sexually explicit text messages and photographs and everything to him, trying to convince him to sneak out of the house.
And y'all remember, he's 13?
12.
12. Almost 13. So that is a...
ripe age.
Yeah. Sorry, Kat. I got real confused and lost all of the
That's okay.
trains.
But that's a a very coming of age. Don't laugh at me. It was a good way to put it. So,
yeah, it was.
And this is where I kind of get lost. But he gets a text message from this girl that he doesn't know that just randomly texts him at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and she's urging him to sneak out of the house the house that he's staying at with his friend, so that they can get together for a sexual encounter. And they go back and forth for a while, and Justin says he doesn't want to. After a while, he's just over it, and then she finally says, "Okay, well, I can't come get you, but I can send a cab to come get you. I'll send a taxi, and then that same taxi will just bring you back to your friend's house."
And just as an aside, any 12-year-olds listening, if any girl ever tells you that they want you to meet up for a sexual encounter, you're 12. They're lying. Don't do it. It's not them.
Shortly after 3 o'clock in the morning on March 30th, 2010, Justin left his friend's house and climbed into a green Action Taxi cab M28 and rode away. And he rode away into the night. Shortly after entering the taxi, Justin sent a final text at 3:13 a.m. to Amber's number that said only 2 words: "Cab died." Later that morning, Dustin woke up and Justin wasn't in the bed where he left him the night before. He kind of looks around, can't find him. He kind of thinks he might be playing a joke on him or something, but
getting some private time to be on the phone or
something. Maybe in the bathroom. So he goes to look for him, can't find him. He notices that his overnight bag that he had from the night before was still there, and so he decided, okay, well, he must have gone home because it's only like 6-7 minutes away. Somebody must have come picked him up. He just forgot his bag. So he heads over and takes the overnight bag with him to Justin's house, and when he gets there, he meets Justin's brother, Tyler, who meets him at the door, and Dustin said, here, this is Justin's bag. He left it at my house. And Tyler looks back at him and says, okay, well, where is he? And at that point, Dustin said, well, this is all paraphrasing. But Dustin basically said, I thought he was with you guys, and that at that point,
Tyler says something along the lines of, if you're playing a joke on me, it's not funny, and you better stop.
Right, and that's when Dustin realized that, both of them realized that something was terribly wrong. So Justin's mom, her name is Amy Fletcher.
And she had just started a new job as...
I'm not sure. It was some kind of sales...
Yeah, some sort of agent.
And she was on the road.
She was on her way to her first appointment.
Right.
They asked if she had picked him up.
Or do you know where Justin is? And she said... Or because Tyler said...
Well, let's call Mom. Let's see if she picked him up.
Right.
And they call her and...
He said no.
Did you pick him up? No.
Call the police.
We don't know where it is. Call 911 now.
Right. So, and she immediately turns around and heads back towards their house. And they are all going to Dustin's house because that was the last place where anybody had seen Justin. So it makes sense that that's where they would kind of convene. So they call 911. The sheriff's deputies arrived at Dustin's house, and they learned from the neighbors. There was a specific neighbor that lived across the street. He was a teacher. He had been up that night, the night before, early into the morning at about 2 o'clock, grading papers for over spring break to have them ready for when they got back in school. And so he saw out of his window a green Action taxi cab. He noticed that across the street, and he witnessed Justin getting into this cab. So immediately...
Talk about a useful coincidence.
Right. So immediately they have a pretty good lead of, they can try to track this down because taxi cabs generally keep a record of all the people they pick up.
Absolutely.
So,
and even if not, just the fact that, just think about how many of these cases that there's no idea. If he hadn't seen anything, there would have been nothing to go on. There would have been no lead until they figured out phone records or something.
Right, and that takes a while.
Yeah, like that, sadly not fast enough, but that was a hell of a lot better than a lot get.
So, and because he's a juvenile, he's 12 years old, they immediately just issue an Amber Alert. And so that goes out at the same time that they issue, Amber and Amber. That didn't
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I just didn't even think of it.
This is my one. An Amber Alert, because the girl's name was Amber.
Yeah. So...
That's all. Carry on. I apologize.
The neighbor tells them about the green Action taxi, and that was out of the ordinary, and it was just a stroke of luck that he was even awake and could see out of his window and saw them. So after they find out this information, the sheriff's office gets this information out to everybody in law enforcement to be on the lookout, or if anybody notices anything, or if they're doing a canvass basically trying to find this boy. So they're knocking on doors and asking anybody else about taxi cabs. Well, they don't even have to go far before they realize that two of the, I think one was a sergeant and the other one was a deputy or something, in their...
I don't recall. I just know he had a really nice beard.
Yeah. Well, two of the officers had actually had either an interaction or they had witnessed a green taxi cab on the side of the highway.
Yeah, one had an interaction with him. The officer noticed that the taxi cab driver was stopped on the side of the road somewhere in the ditch looking around.
Right.
But the one officer asked him if he needed any help. He said that he ran out of gas or the car died, and then when he got out to check, he dropped his keys and he was looking for those, and that his phone died, and every excuse in the book. Officer asked if he needed any help. No. If it's all the same to you, I'd rather just stay here and wait for the ride that I've called to come get me with my dead phone.
Well, he called. I don't think he said anything about his phone, but he said he did. He called his taxi company because they had a spare key and they were going to bring him gas when they brought him the spare key. So
I apparently missed the words taxi company when we were watching it, because that makes that make a lot more sense,
right,
and a lot more credible.
It was the actual name of the company is Green Action Taxi. So that interaction happened on the side of Highway 171, which is just a few miles from Dustin's house. And that was around 6 a.m. when that officer had that interaction.
And the other one, which I found more notable, or more interesting at least, was the cop.
That was the sergeant, yeah.
Yeah, that was the higher ranking one, I know. He was driving to work, but he was running a little bit late, and he noticed, I think he said that the green action taxi driver was sitting in an unmoving car with his hands on the wheel, rocking violently back and forth.
Hard enough to make the car shake, is what he said.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he said that something about it just felt off, and I should have turned around, and I wanted to turn around and go check it out, but I was already running late for work, and I ended up not doing so. Right. And then when he got to work, the first call he heard was about a green action taxi, and he said, I know where we should go.
Right.
And it was a couple hours later, and then the taxi was gone.
Yeah. So the officer that had the interaction with him in around 6, because the sergeant, I think he drove by a little after 8, was what he said, because he was running a little bit late for work.
Right.
So the first interaction that happened with the first deputy, he said that he got the ID from the driver of the taxi, and he identified him as 34-year-old Brian Horn. And when he told him about that whole story, I ran out of gas, I lost my key, they're bringing me stuff from my company, and because Justin had not yet been reported missing, the officer didn't find it suspicious and continued on with his patrol. Although he did note and later relayed and testified to the driver's license that Brian showed him had the indicator that he was a registered sex offender. So he remembered that, and that was one of the first things that clicked in his mind when he heard about, later that morning, they got a call about the green action taxi, and that was immediately where his mind went, as well as the sergeant who saw him shaking the steering wheel violently.
Right.
So there were several other witnesses that called when the Amber Alert went out, because they included the information about the taxi cab in the Amber Alert. So there were several other witnesses that confirmed seeing the taxi on the side of the road in the early morning hours, and I think there was 2 or it might have been a couple of other people, because you remember we're out here in, rural Louisiana.
PFE.
You have a lot of good folks, like good old boys that will stop and ask you, because my luck in the last year for popping tires on my car has been horrendous. So I know from personal experience that if you're on the side of a road, people stop. That's just the way we are out here.
Well, we'll say if you're on the side of the road, people stop.
Okay, yes.
All I know, well, and it is different here, but because I've lived in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina,
right,
and there you could be walking, you could be obviously trying to get somewhere. People are far less likely in most places nowadays to pick people up, and I understand that with the way the world has gotten.
But see, that's what I'm saying. They're just as likely to stop and ask if you need help. They're not going to let you get into the vehicle with them, but they will stop and be like, "Hey, do you need a hand with anything?
Okay.
Or can I go get you something?"
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. That's what I've
happened just a week or two ago.
Yes.
But yeah,
yes.
and that is my point, is that people are not even inclined to stop and help or stop and ask you if you need help in
other places.
Anywhere else.
Yeah. So
that I have lived.
Some of the witnesses that did call and say that they saw the taxi on the side of the road also had versions of, some witnesses said that they had actually they'd just seen a white male coming out of the wood line at one point. So it was all kind of adding up to the same thing.
And if the ID reimagination was anywhere near accurate, I can understand how they would remember him. He was granted, he was somewhat nondescript, but he also had a very
well, I can show you a picture.
He had a face that you would remember seeing coming out of the woods.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously this is something that's different and people are going to notice, especially when you get an Amber Alert on your phone. You know what I mean? At
that point, yes, absolutely. But, I mean, otherwise, especially
pretty unassuming.
Especially in that area, somebody coming out of the wood line?
Yeah, not a big deal. But, I mean, like, they're obviously not hunting or anything. It's a taxi.
But that's what I was going to say. Yeah. Somebody coming out of the wood line to a taxi cab
that's
a little different. Absolutely.
Yeah. So investigators, obviously, this is their first lead, and that's what they're going to run to. And the sergeant that eventually gets to the police station, and then they tell him the first thing that he has to do is report to this missing juvenile case, and he hears about this taxi. He says, "Oh, ding, 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 light bulb. We're going back to where I saw this taxi on the side of the road on Highway 171. Unfortunately, by the time they got back, it was a few hours later, and the taxi cab was no longer there. So Instead, they searched the wooded area on the side of Highway 171, and a little after 2 p.m., unfortunately, they found Justin's body in a shallow pool of water 30 to 40 yards off the highway across the fence line. The autopsy later reported that he had been asphyxiated by either strangulation or smothering or a combination of both. The autopsy did not show signs of sexual assault, which is important.
And that makes sense, too, because otherwise I don't see why he would have killed him that quickly.
Well, see, and this is the thing. His vehicle actually did run out of gas.
So it was a panic kill.
And we'll get there. We don't know who killed him yet.
It was a panic kill.
You don't know anything.
Brian Horn killed him.
Okay. Well, it is the Brian Horn case that was in the title, so. The grandfather of Justin actually went to the scene with Tyler, his brother, to go see.
Did?
Yeah, once they got reports that there was a body found.
I thought the episode said the father and the brother.
No. The father is, he's not in, the mother and the father of Justin are separated, so he lives in a different place. I don't
He
even
must have
know.
just said grandfather, and I misheard.
Yeah, so Grandpa went to the scene, and that was after they had reports of finding the body. And when he got there and he saw that the crime scene tape was all around and he knew it was going to be bad, and when they actually told him that they had found Justin's body, he went back to Dustin's house to be able to relay the information before they heard it over the news. And he didn't even make it out of his truck before he was completely overtaken by tears. And when the family saw him in the truck
when the
crying,
mom saw the grandfather crying,
she knew
what was going on.
Because none of them had ever seen this man cry before in their lives. This was her father, and she had never seen him cry. So she knew it was not going to be good. Now, as they were processing the area and the crime scene, or what they believed to be the crime scene, they found a taxi key with a metal detector in about a few feet away from where a shoe was found, which was also a couple feet away from where the body was actually found. That's pretty much all the evidence they found on the scene. There wasn't a whole lot to go off of. They found the taxi cab keys, they found his body, and they found like the drag marks. That's what eventually led them to the body, was they saw that the grass had been kind of tamped down, and they noticed the disturbance in the brush in the area. They don't find much other than the keys at the scene. So at this point, Brian Horn's brother, Kevin, learned that his brother was a person of interest in Justin's murder because when they traced the taxi cab number that the teacher actually had the wherewithal to be able to remember. But I mean, he's a teacher and he was grading essays, so he's an English teacher. I mean, letters and words are his life. But it's still pretty impressive that he remembered the M28 on the cab. So they got that information back to Green Action Taxi, and they told them where that taxi cab was at that point, or what they
between
knew
that
where
and
it
the
would
officer
have been.
that got the ID from
Right, and the ID, and they knew, that makes a lot of sense. That makes more sense. So, because they already had Warren being in that taxi on that side of the road because the officer had got his ID. So, they put it out that he was a person of interest in Justin's murder, and later that same day, his brother Kevin accompanied Brian back to Action Taxi, where Brian had only started working there in like the last 2 weeks.
And when you say accompanied, I picture escorted. Every time that, because when they said it in the show,
they both worked at Action Taxi.
Either way, because they said that he had voluntarily turned himself in.
Yeah, his brother rode with him to the police station.
Yeah, and I can fully see this as being Big Brother.
Oh yeah, you doing what you need to do, sir. Yeah. So obviously his brother Kevin got suspicious, and that's why he went with him when he returned the taxi back to Action Taxi, and that's when Kevin went ahead and took Brian to the police station. He drove him to the police station himself. So Brian had only started working with this taxi cab about 2 weeks earlier, and Kevin noted that Brian had cleaned out the taxi before he returned it, before they went to the police station.
Aren't you supposed to?
I'm not sure if it was something out of the ordinary, but I do know that it was noted.
And it may have been a more thorough cleaning than normal.
Maybe.
But I would assume that you're supposed to clean the taxi before you give it back.
Right. So,
moving on.
At the point that Kevin brought Brian to the station and had Brian turn himself in, Kevin also gave officers consent to search his vehicle that they had driven to the police station, and that resulted in a seizure of evidence, including an AT&T SIM card that belonged to Brian, out of the glove box. So before we get too much further into this case, I want to take a quick sidebar, because we've talked about this in other episodes, and I didn't really do any justice to talking about the difference between a capital case, first-degree murder, and the aggravating factors that you have to have a first-degree murder conviction.
Yeah, we have.
We did, but I didn't get into the specifics, and I have those specifics for you this time.
Okay.
So the statute, would you like to read it?
Statute states, when the offender has specific intent to kill or to inflict great bodily harm and is engaged in the perpetration or attempted perpetration of aggravated kidnapping, second-degree kidnapping, aggravated escape, aggravated arson, aggravated or first-degree rape, forcible or second-degree rape, aggravated burglary, armed robbery, assault by drive-by shooting, first-degree robbery, second-degree robbery, simple robbery, terrorism, cruelty to juveniles, or second-degree cruelty to juveniles. So, layman's terms, murdering someone while also committing kidnapping, escaping, arson, rape, burglary, or robbery, drive-by, terrorism, not drive-by terrorism, or cruelty to juveniles, or attempting those things.
While in the commission of a murder.
Further, if the victim is in law enforcement or otherwise engaged in helping or rendering aid, like a fireman.
Or EMT.
EMT,
like
yeah.
that.
Somebody that's helping somebody else officially.
Yeah.
More than one person, hitman situation, under 12 or over 65, murdered in direct correlation to drug trafficking, if a restraining order is present, or if the victim is a witness. When
it comes down to it, it basically means that you have to not only be so heinous to take someone's life.
It's a lot more factors than I thought there were.
Yeah, and that's why I put it in there, because there's a lot.
Next time you ask me to read something, I'm not doing it. That was a lot.
Oh, you're welcome.
I was not expecting three paragraphs.
Everybody loved hearing your voice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, due to what occurred the night of Justin's death, and given the fact that Justin was a minor, he was actually 12 at the time, so that one wasn't actually one of the aggravating factors.
Oh, so it's specifically under 12, not 12
under
and
12,
under?
over 65. Well, I believe it says if the victim is under 12 or over 65. I think it's how it was at the statute, actually.
I know with the letter of the law, if it says under 12, it means under 12. If
right,
it says 12 and under, it means 12 and under.
Same thing with
it really matters sometimes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, gotcha. I agree with you. So due to that, they believed that this murder occurred during the commission of a kidnapping. So Horn would be more than qualified if the circumstances that I'm about to outline here in just a minute are what actually happened. So on April 12th, 2010, Brian Douglas Horn was actually indicted by a grand jury for first-degree murder and aggravated kidnapping. Although, interesting fact, when he was initially arrested, before they found the keys with the metal detector and the later evidence that we find on the cab itself, he was actually charged with second-degree murder, and it was upgraded, which hasn't happened in our cases yet. We've had him downgraded, but we haven't had him upgraded, and that's what happened in his case, yes.
Interesting. And do you have why?
Yeah, absolutely, because of the furthering of the evidence that they find.
Wait, I've said that before, and you were like, what are you talking about?
Well, because when we get to what evidence was found, and remember, they already found the SIM card in his brother's car. Mm-hmm. They found the key, the taxi cab key, at the body site.
Yes.
And then there's a few other factors that we'll get into here in just a minute. But first, before we do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Brian Douglas Horn. So here's what we know. He is...
Meet the man behind the murder.
And it's not a good thing. None of this is okay.
No,
so,
no, it is not.
Here's what we know. He was 34 at the time of the murders in 2010. He had had 2 previous convictions as a sexual offender. In 1995, he pled no contest to charges of indecent behavior with an underage female, although those were reduced when he pled to contributing to the delinquency of a juvenile, which
So basically he was plying her with something so that he would be able to get something?
Kind of. The sheriff later testified in court that then 19-year-old Horn had convinced the 13-year-old female to sneak out of her house without her parents' knowledge.
I almost said, well, he was 19.
She's
but then,
13.
yeah, that's
the female victim was 13. So
like 19 to 17?
Right. So in 1995, he was charged with he was sentenced to 3 years in Cato Parish. And then, according to an article by KTBS ABC affiliate, Missouri police, they confirmed that...
Missouri?
Yes, he was in Missouri. After he was released in Cato Parish, he moved to Missouri. And the police up there confirmed that he was arrested for rape in Springfield and pled guilty in 2003. And an officer from the Missouri police testified as well that he had befriended a 14-year-old female, and then he had taken and sexually assaulted her by force. And he pled guilty in 2003 to those sexual assault charges and was released from prison in 2007. A little bit about his background that I got from the psychologist testimony from the trial. Apparently, he had a very traumatic upbringing, according to his psychologist, clinical psychologist. They kind of identified him as a loner, a misfit. He supposedly was a victim of harassment and bullying in his younger years, and he was actually sexually assaulted during a stay at a former Central Louisiana State Hospital when he was 12. And then again, years later, at another institute. The psychologist also stated that Horn told her that his parents eventually turned him and his brother over to the state, and both were emancipated. He had a limited chance at normalcy in his life. Yeah, that's what they said. And
not to minimize any of the things that did happen to him.
Right, because
you always have a choice to not keep this cycle going.
Right. So we can feel bad for child Brian Horn, but we cannot forgive his actions as adult Brian Horn, because no child deserves to be in a traumatic situation like that. And he also reported being raped at least twice by a family member and by officials inside of these state institutions. So
that's always weird.
Child Brian, absolutely, my heart goes out to him, but that does not, what is the word I'm looking for? Mitigate. It doesn't
condone. It doesn't allow for. It doesn't make it all right.
So how true those stories are that came out of Brian Horn's mouth? Some of it was able to be verified, like he was eventually given up by his parents and he was emancipated, and he did go through these different institutions. He was in and out of juvenile detention, and he had constant psychological and issues. He had multiple teachers and people that interacted with him when he was younger that came and testified to the fact that he was a very troubled child. So probably true, but again, it does not release you or absolve you of your responsibilities to be a decent fucking human being. So aside from the two sexually related offenses, Horn had at least 12 other arrests on his record. And at the time of this event in 2010, he was married.
Oh, wait, I knew that.
Yeah, and his wife was quoted as saying to the detectives that they had fought over the weekend and that she had not seen him for at least 2 days. Random wild fact. This is just an interesting thing for me. Before the trial started, Horn's attorneys filed a motion requesting that the prosecution not refer to Horn as bisexual or homosexual during the trial.
Interesting.
I don't know if it was granted or not. I just thought that was an interesting little tidbit, because apparently he didn't want his reputation tarnished. That's what it sounded like. I don't know why else he would do that. I don't get it. And honestly, I do. I get it, because you don't want to taint the jury in a way that would make them, because if anybody has a bias to that. But, I
mean, I would see it more as he was convicted of what again?
First-degree murder and aggravated kidnapping.
Right. And if he had been referred to as homosexual or bisexual, how likely do you think he would have been convicted of either sexual assault or rape or attempted?
Well, they just didn't have any evidence of that, and we'll get to that in a second.
And I understand that, yeah. But when was this?
2010.
2010, yeah. I could still see that as being a possibility of just convincing the jury that it was likely enough. It would have been one more aggravating factor in against his case to most. I don't know how to say this very well.
Okay. Okay.
Because I'm trying not to.
Okay. Well, we can move on. So he was indicted by a grand jury on April 12, 2010. However, the trial didn't start until March 28th of 2014, almost 4 years to the day that the abduction and a murder happened. the abduction and murder happened on March 30th.
Right.
He started, well, we'll get there. So, now...
I feel like that's always your answer, and it's one of the most aggravating ones you have.
Because I gotta keep something in my pocket. Okay, so...
You don't have pockets.
I do on this dress.
Oh.
The state presented evidence of the defendant's guilt, including forensic evidence of the SIM card that they found in his brother's vehicle that they drove to the police station. That SIM card had a wealth of information on it because the SIM card itself was the SIM card that was linked to the phone number that had been texting Justin that night.
Ah.
So there was no Amber. The unknown phone number that Justin received the text message from the night before he died was from Brian Horn's cell phone. And it revealed that he was sending explicit text messages and pornographic photos to try and lure...
He was sending text messages with predatory intent.
Absolutely. And he also, because of this, he also had absolute knowledge that Justin was only 12 years old. Because since this was never Amber, it was always this 34-year-old convicted sex offender. These texts showed that Amber, who we now know as Horn, sent 24 sexually explicit photos, to which Justin replied, quote, "You gotta remember, I'm only 12, unquote."
Damn.
And they also recovered texts sent the morning of the abduction that Justin received from Horn that stated, in reference to the taxi that Amber had sent to get him, quote, "He went to the inn to get you. I'm just watching porn," unquote. To which Justin replies, quote, "Yeah, but are you sure he can get me back in 30 minutes?" unquote. So he was still kind of on the fence, not really sure he wanted to go and do this, but I mean, he was still sneaking out of his best friend's house to be able to go meet up with this girl that, you know. The other evidence that they had was they found a single latent fingerprint that was able to be lifted from the taxi that matched Justin Bloxham's. And that provided the link between Justin and Horn, proving that Justin had been in Horn's taxi. However...
I thought it had said that the latent print couldn't be identified as either Justin's or Brian's.
No, it absolutely was identified as Justin's. And the only part that I found interesting was Justin's fingerprint
Really? The only part?
Yeah, no, this whole thing. But Justin's fingerprint was not found inside the car. It was actually found on the outside of the passenger side window of the taxi. So they didn't find any, or if they did find any, they weren't able to use them from the inside. But the one that they did find that was able to be identified as Justin was found on the outside passenger window.
Because the inside was thoroughly clean, but he didn't think to get the outside windows.
So the autopsy results showed that Justin died of suffocation, smothering with possible strangulation. And the coroner, Dr. James Traylor, not Taylor, Traylor, testified that Justin died from being smothered and opined that the perpetrator smothered Justin while on Justin's back. So the person who killed Justin was actually sitting on his back and was smothering him from behind. Dr. Traylor identified several areas of petechiae. Do you know what those are?
I've never heard that word in my life.
Okay. Petechial hemorrhaging?
Okay. I'm still not sure where the petechial...
They're ruptured blood vessels. They're teeny tiny little ruptured blood vessels that are usually found in the eye. They can also be found in the mouth as well as in the lining under your skin if pressure is applied.
Okay.
And it usually happens when the lack of oxygen because it's putting pressure against, the brain and things.
Right.
So they found the petechiae in Justin's eyes and on his face and forehead, which would have required the perpetrator to apply pressure to some part of the body to prevent the drainage of blood to the heart.
Okay.
So Dr. Traylor identified an abraded contusion on the inside of Justin's mouth, consistent with the perpetrator compressing his lips and mouth against his braces. Dr. Traylor also described numerous abrasions on Justin's body and testified that they were ante-mortem, which means prior to death.
Yes. Ante with an E, y'all.
So in summation, the state presented photos and testimony from Dr. Traylor that 1, exhibited Justin's injuries on his neck, face, hands, back, shoulder, and torso. 2, the injuries occurred before death. And 3, the injuries were not solely attributable to smothering. The reason that they had to set that up was because they had to prove that
Force was applied before death.
Yes, that was a conscious decision. He was obviously assaulting him prior to actually smothering and killing him. And so his final conclusion of the autopsy was asphyxiation as a result, or asphyxiation during a struggle. The state also presented testimony from Horn's wife at the time and another adult woman that he'd had sexual encounters with regarding their sexual relations with Horn. The state elicited testimony that Horn sometimes choked them during consensual sex, and his wife testified that they were swingers and had sometimes engaged in sexual relations with other adult men and women. The other woman that they had testified...
But he's not homosexual or bisexual.
No. The other woman testified that Horn suggested that a younger man join them in sexual activities. And this is just testimony.
That Horn suggested?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. So, interestingly, they also allowed the jurors to go and inspect and get a closer look at the taxi cab itself that had been taking in evidence, which I always find extremely interesting when they take the jurors on field trips to give them like a better scope of the crime scene and the evidence. And I honestly believe that helps them put the full picture together in their heads and to come to a more full conclusion when they're making their decision, especially in capital murder cases. When I feel like that's something that they need. They have to that hands-on, because you can see pictures all day and still not have a full scope.
So I think that's
really
great.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool, and they're expensive, but I still think that's a really
You've got to
really
take
cool
12
thing.
people.
Okay, so the prosecution's case laid out, like I'm sure most of you true crime fans out there can pretty well guess how this played out, but this is what they presented in court. So, backed by their supporting evidence and testimony, they believe that Brian Horn obtained Justin Bloxham's phone number
From an abandoned MySpace account.
No, actually.
Really?
Really. So, this is what they believe. And they pretty well... It's all circumstantial. You have to remember that this is all based on testimony and leaps, but not really... They're more like little skips.
You know all about those.
Right. So Brian Horn's stepdaughter had a friend that would come over to the house. One day while she was at Brian's house, he asked to see her phone because he was going to put ringtones on it. And this family friend of his stepdaughter's had Justin's contact number in her phone. He actually copied all of her contacts from her phone and put them into his phone.
That's not suspicious at all.
So that was how the prosecution believed that he initially got Justin's number to be able to text him. And when he did this that night, he used the guise of a teenage girl and provocative texts and images to seduce 12-year-old Justin into leaving the safety of his friend's house at 3 o'clock in the morning, get into a taxi cab that she had paid to have come pick him up so that they could meet and have a sexual encounter, and then safely return him back to his friends. But Horn, in the most idiotic and scatterbrained fashion, he forgot to fill up his taxi cab with gas before he picked up his intended victim, and they ran out of gas on the side of the highway. And the prosecution believed in this high-anxiety situation, because this was not something that Horn had planned, they believe that Justin started getting anxious because he realized, and that was the last text message he sent, the cab died.
Yeah.
Because they ran out of gas. At this point, they're not sure...
Which now makes considerably more sense.
Right. They're not sure if Justin realized that he had been duped. He wasn't sure, because they say that maybe when he sent the text message and then Brian's phone immediately dinged after he sent the message, that could very well have happened, and then that was when he realized that he was not talking to a 14-year-old. And at that point, they got into a struggle that ended with Horn trying to either assault Justin or just becoming physically aggressive, and in the act of trying to assault him, he
determined that it was less worth it to continue the assault and just determined that it was going to be more worth it for him in the long run to get rid of the evidence.
Well, I mean, because he was on the side of a road, this wasn't part of his plan.
Yeah.
And instead of, just calling it off and letting him go, because of the sexual predatory nature that he had within him, he couldn't just not. So when he tried to assault him, Justin showed fight. That was when from the autopsy, it seems that he got on his back and then put his hand over his mouth and smothered him until he was no longer breathing and dead. Now, who knows what would have happened had he not run out of gas, and what terrors that he would have been put through otherwise, which is this was already pretty horrific. But this situation was not what Brian had planned, and that's what the prosecution said too. After he murdered Justin, he then carried/dragged his body into the nearby woods, over a fence, and then threw Justin into a small pool of water.
Not to grandmother's house we go.
No. And in doing so, he got his shoes muddy, and he lost his taxi cab key, which is why he told the officer who happened to stop by the cab on the side of the highway that he was waiting for the company to bring him a spare set and to bring him gas. Now, during the trial, defense counsel J. Antonio Florence conceded that Horn had killed Justin, but he also stated that this didn't have anything to do with sexual assaults. He said that his sexual offender status was with females. Quote, he doesn't rape boys, unquote. He said that he meant for, and this is what he said, his defense attorney actually said in court that Horn meant for Justin to come back with him to have sex with his wife, and he was going to be able to enjoy that because they were swingers, right? So he was going to bring this 12-year-old boy to lose his virginity with his wife.
What the fuck?
That's what his
I'm sorry, I'm trying to lessen the fucks, but
that's
Jesus.
Okay. Yeah, that's warranted. And that's what the defense attorney claimed that they were doing. That's why he went and picked him up. Yeah. So the defense counsel argued that the jury could not find him guilty of first-degree murder because the state failed to prove the defendant had specific intent to kill, and they failed to prove that Horn was engaged in an aggravated kidnapping or second-degree kidnapping when Justin died. However, Horn did not testify in his own defense, and when it came to the defense's turn in trial, they arrested without calling any witnesses. And a unanimous jury found Horn guilty of first-degree murder and determined that he should be sentenced to death in 2014. But wait, you know those appeals that I'm always using for research? This one was interesting. Do you know why?
No, I don't.
Because his appeal was successful. His conviction and his sentencing got overturned in 2018, and he was granted and ordered a new trial. As
and
if
then
the first
they
one
once again said, you guilty.
We don't know that yet.
They better have.
Okay. But since we're already at almost an hour mark here, you guys are going to have to wait for the next episode.
What?
I'm sorry I didn't warn you in the beginning.
There better be a bunch
I didn't
more
know.
that you were
There is
willing
a
to talk about, because that sounds like there's one more sentence.
No,
I think this is bullshit.
there is a lot more, baby. I've got like 4 more pages at least.
That doesn't mean anything.
And then I've got at least 3 other more pages over here. So you guys are going to have to wait till the next episode, and I'm sorry I didn't warn you at the beginning. I didn't know that it was going to be a 2-parter. I had a feeling I did say it might be, but that just means good news for you guys, because that means you get 2 episodes back to back, week to week, instead of having to wait every 2 weeks. So you'll get one this week, and you'll get one next Monday as well.
A lot of platitudes.
Well, it is what it is. So this is where we're going to leave off. He was convicted of first-degree murder in 2014, but I will get into more details about the appeal and why it was granted and overturned. And that's where we'll leave you for now. I'm so sorry.
That's all, folks.
We love you. We thank you. Thank you for listening. Make sure you come back next week to get the second part of this, because it's going to be, oh my gosh, twisty, turny, and crazy. And I will actually have links in the show note for, we've got resources for sexual assault. We've got resources for mental health. We do have this cool new thing that I set up for you guys to be able to support the show if you're interested. The tiers start at $3. I think it goes $3, $5, $8, $10, and you can do it monthly or you can do a one-time payment. Either way, whatever you decide, even if it's the smallest denomination, you get a shout out on the next episode. You subscribe every month, you'll get a shout out every episode. I'm just saying. I love you guys that much. And just a little bit, that money will go straight back into the podcast. It costs about $20 a month to be able to host this on the website, so that would just be really helpful for that, if for nothing else. And the email for us is down in the show notes, sinlawpodcast@gmail.com, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, or case referrals. I'm always willing and lovingly accepting all of those.
She's a bit of a case hoe.
A little bit. And again,
but in summation, check the show notes. Love y'all. See you next week.
Take care out there.
This has been an Elf Audio production.